is the first session of the year for the Finance Committee, so welcome. We have, looks like 3 remote participants this evening. That will be Nick, Dan, and Heather, so we will do all voting via roll call, and in person we have Mark, Angelina, Kyle, Greg, and myself, Victoria. So the first order of business is to open the public hearing to discuss the FY26 operating and capital budget.
Move to open the public hearing?
Second.
We have a motion and a second to open the public hearing. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, we will vote by roll call for it. I'll start online. Heather?
Aye.
Dan?
Aye.
Nick?
Aye.
Mark?
Aye.
Angelina?
Aye.
Kyle?
Aye.
Greg?
Aye.
Victoria votes aye. Okay, great. The public hearing is open. I will read the legal notice. So in accordance with Article 6, Section 6.6 of the Grafton Town Charter and Article 3, Section 3 of the Town Bylaws, the Finance Committee will hold a public hearing to permit public discussion of the proposed operating and capital budgets for fiscal year 2026 as presented by the Town Administrator. This public hearing will be held on Wednesday, January 29th, 2025 at 7 p.m. in Conference Room A of the Grafton Municipal Center at 30 Providence Road. Remote participation via Zoom will also be available using the link on the January 29th, 2025 Finance Committee agenda. Interested citizens are invited to attend this public hearing and offer comments. Anyone wishing to may attend in person via Zoom. Okay. So with all of that out of the way, Evan, I think we are so excited to hear you present.
Well, I'm excited to be here. Thank you. So this is our fiscal 2026 budget presentation. This is going to be a little bit different than years before, is that we are showing you 2 different budgets. One is a balanced budget, as we are obligated to give you folks, and the other one shows the difference between what was requested and what we were able to actually fund in the budget. Before we get started, I just want to point to everyone that our budget book link is here, as is the Financial Transparency Center, although I will note that the budget book doesn't go live until the first week of February, so we're still making tweaks there. The budget is live in the Financial Transparency Center, but those notes and other descriptive items will be updated as we move in through the month of February. So that just is always something we build as we go. Okay. So this year, budget priorities very similar to every other year. Maintain a competitive work environment, maintain level services, and attempt to fund the Grafton Public Schools as best that we can to make sure that they remain competitive. Just a basic overview. We still have a AA stable rating. That hasn't changed since 2021. That's the last time we had a ratings call. Our OPEB report, we have a $65 million liability. We are up to $750,000 funded, which is a whopping 1.15%. We are going to talk about OPEB as we get a little deeper into this presentation. We have a different funding rubric and some really heavy savings in the OPEB market, so we're pretty excited to try to hit those goals. Stabilization, about 5.1 million, and free cash is, I believe, a Grafton record at 4.4 million. And that makes our current operating reserves right about 11% of the operating budget.
And what's the normal expected range for that?
We are, I believe our policy is 5 to 15. 5 is the low, 15 is the high.
Yep.
Time to get that ratings review with that kind of money in your
Yep.
in your reserves.
Well, we're going to spend it, so don't worry about that.
Okay, never mind.
Move right into it.
Cancel the meeting with Wall Street.
Yeah, we don't need any S&P right now. No, we'll still have a very healthy reserve at the end of this presentation.
Skip has joined the call.
Thank you.
Okay, so tax levy has increased from about 50.6 million to 53 million. Our 2.5 tax increase looks to be about 1.3 million for this year, and our new growth we have at 923,000. So you'll remember in years past we hovered around the $800,000 range. We have consistently exceeded that by a fair amount. In fact, last year our new growth was again another, I believe, record year at 1.269 million.
What does that translate into value?
I don't know top of mind, to be honest with you. And I got rid of that slide because no one asked any questions about that last year. Literally, that's always the slide after this, and it's gone.
Is it
But thanks,
like residential or?
Yes, it's mostly residential, some commercial, very little industrial. But I can add that back in.
So that's straight value times tax rate.
Right.
I won't ask that question.
I should have led with, if you have any questions, please just ask because we know Mark's going to do it anyways. So let's just get that out of the way early. No, I will have to clarify that. I don't want to give you the wrong number off of.
I was just
memory.
curious.
Sorry, I'm not running this presentation. Just close that because I keep changing it. This is the standard slide we've had since I've been hired. It really is just showing our drawdown of those override funds that were from the last override, and we do not have any of those funds left on the books.
So it lasted 5 years, and that was what we said when we when we passed it.
And that's what, when I was being interviewed for the job, that's what I was told that we were gonna do. So
Were we intending to spend it that way, so much up front, or was that because of COVID?
no, so
kind of
that's
messed
that's the
things up,
excess
or-
capacity.
That's what's left over from the 3 points.
So that's what's left over at the end
I
of every
see.
year. So
Okay,
it's
gotcha.
I can see how you could see it that way, but it's us drawing it down,
Right.
essentially, which we did on a pretty consistent,
Looks
in a pretty
consistent.
consistent way.
Yeah, so it was almost $1 million the first year, and I think,
Yeah, because it was 3.2.
yeah.
Okay, well, thank you. This is our new growth over time. You can see it. It's self-explanatory. Go ahead, Will. All right. So
Dude, you got to be quicker. You're slowing down his flow.
He needs better cues. Don't worry. By the end, we'll be in lockstep.
you gave me a flashback to when I was running the PowerPoint for Jay's presentation, and I was horrible.
I remember
I was
that.
off
Yeah.
by like
You were
a
way
lot.
off.
Yep. So I'm going to show you two different operating budget. This is the operating budget as requested, and this shows what I showed to the select board the other night. Essentially, there are some minor revisions. They are really small numbers. They're not really worth spending a ton of time on. The other variation, if you looked at any of the materials that I had sent out before, is that I've pulled unclassified out of general government. I did that for two reasons. One is purely selfish, because we've done a really good job at maintaining the things that we can maintain. But two is that we were showing an 8.6% growth in general government. And I don't really think that was a fair representation of the work that we're doing here. And I wanted to be able to then also explain publicly what unclassifieds are. And so that's where your pension, Medicaid, FICA, health insurance, all of that lives. And so those are costs that are very difficult for us to have a direct control over. Try as we might.
That BVT number you say is estimated. What did they say? When did they say they would give you a number? And how confident are you with that?
We usually see that in March, I believe is when they do their. They'll give us a heads up in February. Michael Fitzpatrick will give me a call usually and give me a heads up. We're fairly confident on that, given what we did last year, which I think was like 15-point-something%.
It was huge last year.
Yeah, and then the year before that. So we feel pretty comfortable there. Also, if it turns out to be 6% or 10% or 10%, it's not a huge swing in that number. So we're comfortable.
Okay.
Do we know if that includes the debt override, that exclusion that was?
That doesn't show up here. That shows up in a different
Okay.
portion of our tally. You'll see we have a decrease in health and human services, although we are hearing some things out of the Health Alliance, so that may change rapidly. We may be looking to do something else. I also want to draw your attention to culture and recreation. That's a 6.8% increase. That includes the library and recreation increases for both of those. You'll see them in the line item budget. But the reason I wanted to bring that up directly is that it's $100,000, but the budget is so small that 6.8% looks like an outlier. And I just again, trying to be fair to those people doing really good work at managing their budgets. they're not really huge increases. You will see too, the schools are funded here at 6.8% in the request. That does show a decrease of the original conversation by roughly $700,000. The original percentage, I believe, was up around 8%, but Jay and I and Kathleen and Mary have been working on that number.
And is that includes making up for the $850,000 that we pulled out of last year's budget and used free cash for?
Correct.
So really, the 25 adopted would be almost 850,000 higher if we hadn't done that. Correct.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. Next slide, please. Okay, so what does that mean? That means at the end of the day, the budget, as I was discussing with the select board, was about 1.65 million in deficit that we're short.
That 1.6 with the school number, that gives the schools, it keeps the schools at level service?
Yes, it keeps them at that 6.8% that they requested.
Okay. So there would be, if that budget miraculously, new growth went up $1.6 million.
That's where we would have it.
And then they would have level service, there'd be no reductions in their operation.
Correct.
Okay.
As I understand it, although we're continuing to have that conversation. So, go ahead, Will. Nope, go back. Sorry, didn't talk about that at all. What are you doing?
What are you doing?
This is the budget as I'm proposing it as a balanced budget. So you will see the major change is that the schools are now at 3.4% instead of 6.8%. So that's a roughly $1.5 million increase for the school department as opposed to a $3 million increase to the school department.
Everything else on the municipal side stays the same?
Pretty close. You will see that the public works number shifted a little bit, and that's because I moved some of our MS4 compliance over into the capital plan, trying to, as we do, shave as much money as possible. I've been told this slide is very confusing, so I'm gonna go through it and then I will redesign it. What I'm showing here is how we get to who gets what in the budget. The reason the Prop 2.5 and new growth numbers are exactly the same is because that's what we get overall. Those are the same numbers from the other slide. We then start with about a 60-40 split because that's what the budget is split at, and that's not a hard and fast number. That's just a Jay needs a number to start talking about, and I need a number to start talking about, and so where is that number? In this budget, you will see that we're actually a 70-30 split, with 70 going to the schools and about 30% or 700,000 going to the town.
Now this is the growth?
That's us dividing the growth, correct?
What's confusing about that? That's pretty clear.
I don't know. You got these millennials. I don't know what they're talking about.
Hey. So, but again, that doesn't take into account the 900,000 of one-time money that was used on the school's budget last year and had to be replaced.
It doesn't include replacing all of that at the same time, at one time. It's not a. That's how I understood that they got the number down to the 6.8%. All right. So our municipal environmental increases. This is a slide that I like to show because these are the things that we really don't have a lot of say over, but they wind up driving the municipal side of the budget greatly. So you will see that my insurance is reasonable at a 2%. Retention and no, not retention. Retirement and pension is about 9.7%. 25% for Medicare and FICA. 10% for health insurance. Our health insurance number is actually 15% about. We were able to move funds within the budget and cover some of that 5% on our side to try to keep it where it
But
needs
that
to be.
health insurance number that's carried on the municipal side, that increase, that includes every town
That's-
employee, school and
Correct.
town.
Correct.
Same with the Medicare FICA
Yes.
and whatever
Share
teachers
we get.
aren't, whatever teachers are in the Worcester County.
Right.
Okay.
So it winds up being, as I understand it, about a 75-25 split. 75% are school department employees.
Do you know why the Medicare and FICA increase is so large? Is that a rate increase or a number of people? Or?
Mary, do you want to speak to Medicare and FICA?
Yes, I had to
That's the best explanation I've ever understood.
increase that because it has been, well,
I know why
Thank
it
you.
is. I just was trying to include Mary. So Mary, you're a little broken up. I'm gonna jump in there. We've chronically underfunded that line.
so
It was
bringing it to 730.
So, essentially, we've underfunded that line pretty chronically, and we've had to do transfers every year. So, this is just us fixing that.
So it's
issue.
bringing it back up to where it should be plus.
Correct. Plus,
raises.
plus the regular increase, which I think was closer to 10%. So it's about a
Okay.
15% swing that we've been underfunding that. And the reason we're doing that up front is that we are closing down a lot of the avenues that help us drive free cash as we make this budget tighter. And we don't know that we're going to have that transfer money at the end of the year, so we got to do it here. And it's better budgeting practices. Well, I'm not done yet. So then we've got sanitation, 2.7% increase. BVT, like I showed, we were around 8%. So that's about a 9.2% increase, or about $1.2 million. So now you can go to the next slide.
Thank you.
My friend. Thank you. So if the municipal side started at 702,000 and we had about 1.2 million in increases, that puts us at 900. No, wow, not even close to anything on the screen. Negative 535,932,000. And so I built this slide last year because it was really confusing, because I'd go up, and it actually stemmed from some really great questions I had at the school committee budget presentation. Well, if you only had 700,000 and you got you're starting at negative money, then how did you get to the end, right? Because there's other factors, and the explanation for that is that there are other drivers that are not shared with the school department per se, right? So those are the offsets of our sanitation budget. Those are your bag fees. We have other revenue factors, local meal tax, all these things that go in to cover other parts of the budget. So that's how we're getting from negative 535 to get us back to zero.
So basically what you're saying is the 60-40 split, or what ended up being 70-30, is only tax revenue.
Correct.
You have estimated receipts, building permits, meals tax, all that stuff. You're seeing an increase in those numbers that helps knock down that 535.
Correct. Exactly. That's a great explanation. Do it like that next time, Will. Okay. But yes, that's how we get there. Go ahead, Will.
So on the school side, the only revenue that they have benefit of when talking about like their revenue versus expense is tax revenue.
Yes, but also your Chapter 70 increases and all your circuit breaker and all the other things that go into the school department budget. That slide is really this presentation is both for you folks and to educate the public. So it's really to break it down to the core of it, which is there are other revenues that come into that budget that cover other expenses that have nothing to do with education and that are needed to defray the costs of what we're doing.
You know what might be helpful for the public is if you take, put a slide together that shows the total revenues that increase year over year, including Chapter 70, including unrestricted local aid. I take it using the governor's number in your presentation?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
So if you put that slide in there, it'll show a $1.3 million increase in the levy, 900,000 in new growth,
Right.
200,000 in Chapter 70, and then that way the public can see the total amount of increase in revenue that you have to support
Yes.
the budget. And I think they'll understand the deficit. And the thing that we really have to show is the part of the town budget that's picking up the school increase because Chapter 70 has remained flat.
Right.
One of the things that we put together this year is we did a pie chart. And we said, and back in 2008, this was the breakdown where you had Chapter 70 covered 38% of the school budget and the assessments covered whatever. Now it's 25%.
Yeah.
So that shows that there's bigger burden on the taxpayers, and that's why we've had 2 overrides in this town since 2014, because the state's not holding up their part of the bargain. I think the public needs to see that and understand that.
Yeah. I agree. Great suggestion. We will work on doing a better data representation of that. So what you'll see on this slide is that as the budget is presented right now, we're at negative 25, pretty much negative 26,000, which in a $84 million budget is pretty darn close to balanced.
So what are you gonna
and-
do with your time off when he reduces your
Right.
salary to make that? up?
25. By the way, Will, that's,
You know, I've got a big to be read pile for both. So I'll be in my office.
yeah. So we, I didn't bother honestly moving things in the background with Mary to get us to zero because we're so early in the process. Honestly,
Things are gonna change on
It's
a
going to
daily
change 9
basis.
times. It's
Yeah.
it's just really wasn't where we needed to spend our time in the last few days. All right. This is also something I've been doing in the last couple of years. This is a graph that grows over time and gets a new peg every time we have a meeting to discuss the budget, and it shows the budget fluctuations. And I do that because one of the criticisms we get a lot in local government, and I actually just saw it online last week, is that we will say the budget's not set in stone. We don't know what this number is. We don't know what that is. We haven't done this yet. We haven't done that yet. People don't understand that that's because we get information in dribs and drabs over time. So you'll look, our initial submissions, we were negative 2.1. Then we did some work for the select board meeting and we were at 1.7. Now the governor's initial budget released and we were at 1.6. And now I'm doing a presentation to you folks with a proposed budget and we're at negative 25,977.
So based on that, you're cutting 1.5 out of the schools and 150,000 out of the town?
Correct.
Do I understand that correctly?
Yep. Great. So changes to expenses, we'll breeze right over this because we've pretty much covered this, but this does show the break. A 10% health insurance bump for the town is about 600K. 9.7% increase for retirement is about 300,000. We do include in our budget a 2% COLA across the board, except for where contractually higher, which I believe is one of our unions at 3% currently this year. We have all our contracts are 2% and 1 3%, but they're staggered years, so we're only having 1 3% 1 year. And energy is actually doing really well for us, so that remains stable. On the municipal side of the house, we plan on removing 2 part-time positions come July 1. Public safety, we have moved we continue to maintain the cruisers in the capital plan, which we've discussed we don't like, but is our lot that we have right now. We also have shifted a little bit of the direction of the police department with our new chief, Chief Minardi. Rather than filling the deputy chief position, we are filling a second lieutenant position. It gave better opportunities for growth. Plus, when you don't have anyone in the lieutenant's position, it's hard to promote up to deputy chief because no one's done a job that's similar. Overall, that is not a big cost driver for us. I did just want to make sure that I pointed that out. Jay will come in to do the school committee or the presentation, I'm sure, for the schools. Public Works, I moved the engineering into MS4 permitting. And highway has a slight increase. I'm reluctant to move any of those changes. They are really minor adjustments and they're both needed for training and paving projects that we have going on. And when I say minor, we're talking like $30,000. So it's not crazy money, but I want to point that out here. All right, so cost savings and revenue initiatives. So we continue to be very aggressive on grants. Our fiscal 24 number closed out at just shy of 1.4 million in grants. This year, at about the halfway mark, we're up to 960 as of last week when we got another $50,000 grant, roughly. I didn't frame this correctly. Sorry, I apologize. Slide makes a lot of sense in my head. One of the things that we need to consider and discuss as we move through this budget process is looking at creating an enterprise fund for municipal solid waste to move the subsidization of the trash program from the general fund out into a fee-for-service model. Really is the best practice. And it would shift about it would free up about $600,000 in capacity into the off of the general fund.
So
That
what
would
would
require
that,
the rates to go up with the bag fees and all that, right?
Nope. So this is infancy. So I don't want to oversell what we're talking about here, but essentially what we'd be talking about is, you would have a trash fee that would go out in the form of a bill, and then you would pay as you throw. So half the program would be pay as you throw, half would be trash fee.
So similar to
Similar.
so like I've been talking to you about the stormwater fee, so it'd be like
Correct.
sending a bill, okay.
Yep, same essential idea.
Good
And
idea.
what we're doing is we would be keeping, and this is just proposal right now, but we would be keeping the bag fees so that the people that are using more of the service are seeing the burden, right? They're creating more waste. But also the people that are not having trash collection from the town of Grafton at all are not paying that via their taxes.
So it would be only for people who are eligible for curbside collection.
Correct. Yep. And it'd be a totally fee for service model. And the great thing about that is that covers your costs. So we're not subsidizing that in the general fund year over year and watching that number creep up.
When do you think you bring that forward?
Tonight is when I'm starting.
Yeah.
But we have work to do. And I also don't know, excuse me. I sprung this on Mary earlier. This is one of my 3 a.m. When should we talk about this conversations? I haven't talked about this with the board yet. So I just sprung this on Mary about 2 hours ago that I was gonna have this conversation.
I think Dan has his hand raised.
Yeah, I just want to clarify. So this 600,000 is not factored into
Nope.
the numbers you just showed us.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep. This
Got it.
would be
Thanks.
an additional 600,000 that in theory we would be shifting towards the school department.
Do you know how many households?
I'm not. I will go through all of that in finite detail. I promise. I don't have it.
So basically, do you think you'd be able to pull this off at the Springtown meeting? You'd want this for fiscal 26?
Yeah, Mary-
I know you.
I do. Mary, and I talked briefly earlier today. We tentatively think we can get there.
Yep.
There are some things that we would need to work out, i.e., with the accounting software, different modules. What is the cost of the module? Can we get it spooled up in time? And so, realistically, I don't know, but I also want us to be talking about it throughout this. And if it winds up that we have to shoot for January 1,
It'd be 300,000.
it'd be 300,000, right? But
Not a bad idea.
At least we're having the conversation. And I want to, as I said, I want to be clear. I don't have all of the data currently, and I also want to spend more time with the finance director to make sure that I'm not overburdening those departments as we try to move in that direction. If this is even something that people want to discuss.
Yeah.
One of the questions I foresee coming up would people that currently have the option to have residential collection be able to opt out of this?
Yep, that's my vision of it. My previous municipal experience is it's from a town that has an enterprise fund and curbside collection, and that number does fluctuate based on the number of residential customers that you have. But the nice thing about it is that you're building that budget in order to cover the costs of that specific service. So if you're not using the service,
Yeah, so if you're $1 million now.
Right.
And then 50 people opt out and you drop to 950, well, then your budget's 950, it doesn't matter.
Correct.
But you're still gonna get a $600,000 that you're paying now in your operating budget out of your operating budget.
Correct.
I think it makes perfect sense.
Yeah, I think for the select board meeting they talked about, trying to figure out places to cut where it wouldn't impact service or staffing. I think this is one of the perfect places. This is one thing I had written down to look at, and this is something that I think we need to seriously consider.
But it's not so much a cut as a putting it
It's a
out
shift.
to the
It's a
people.
shift.
it's a shift. Now, and we'll talk, I have some scenarios built out a little bit to, again, foster the conversation. It's really supposed to be the budget presentation, but I also want us to start thinking about this as a group so we can have fruitful conversations as we move forward. Sorry, Bill, I keep hitting the microphone. And so we're going to talk about some of those scenarios now. Nope, not yet. Variables to consider. So, as we've discussed many times, and I know all of you folks know this, it's only January. Our health insurance number will become finite as we move into February. New growth is going to be higher than what we have there, but again, you have to be very careful that we aren't on the wrong side of new growth. And then Chapter 70 increase, we know, is a major driver for growth. And while the governor's budget does seem a little anemic to me, Hopefully we'll see better numbers as we move.
What they
Is
got,
it still
75?
30 per person per
No,
student?
No,
75.
it's yeah,
75.
75, which is good. But as we've
Well, it was 100 last
discussed
year,
that,
so it's
Yeah.
less than last year.
which is why
But it's better than last year's starting,
Correct.
which was 30.
right.
a good
So
point.
so maybe that's where our optimism needs to lie. But yeah, I don't know. I want to.
Anemic's a good word.
Yeah, it's not horrible.
Ridiculous.
But it's not. Okay, so these are some updated quasi scenarios that I pitched with the select board. So if you've seen that, you've seen some of these. I did add a scenario 2.5 at the behest of Miss Roy, so we'll see that when we get to it as well. So the first one is to use our free cash stabilization and reductions to close that gap. We would reduce by say $500,700,000 and then use possibly $1 million in free cash stabilization. The farther we go down this budget process, the less likely I am to head in that direction at all. Our new growth and some of these projects that we see supposedly coming online, are not solid enough where I feel comfortable using them as a basis for growth. And so I would only push this option if I was going to be able to show you that we're going to have another $1 million in new growth in there. It's going to show up. It might be a year from now. It's risky anyways, but it's feeling more and more risky the farther we go down into this rabbit hole, because just things are a little uncertain out there. And as
If
we
you
saw,
don't get
with,
an override, if you don't get an override this year,
yeah,
right, and you gotta cut, you'd have to cut $1 million out of the budget this year.
yes,
What that does is it delays any potential reductions for at least a year. And then there is the hope that the growth could come back into the budget.
right.
And if it doesn't, well, then you're right back where you started this year and you're gonna cut $1 million out of the budget. But at least it delays, I'm never a fan of using one-time revenue sources to fund operating expenses. You should never do that.
Yeah.
But in this particular instance, if there is a hope that you can do it, it might make sense. It might. Just something to think about.
On the other hand, we did this last year to the tune of $1.2 million.
Right.
So this would be the second year in a row we'd be using one-time money to fund the operating.
I forgot about that. We did that with the schools last year.
The schools
Yep.
and moved the cruisers out of the capital plan
Right.
and other.
Good point.
Small
That's a good
items like
point,
that.
Greg. I forgot about that.
Really quickly, Dan?
Yeah, I was gonna also point out about current fiscal year, but I just want to be clear. The idea with this is you would do it in the hopes that new growth will jump up, and then we could possibly not just avoid the override this year, but potentially put it off indefinitely if new growth just continues to keep that pace. Is that the idea here?
Yeah, correct. This is my fee. I mean, Mark's absolutely correct. This is not the way you run a municipal budget, and this is not. I don't want to use one-time funds if we can avoid it, and that's why we do things like do the cruisers as our last ditch effort. Right? We just have nowhere else to go. This is what we're going to do. I don't know that we're there yet, but two, you look at projects like say 8 Pine Street that's going to bring you $400,000 in taxable revenue that stalls. We have zero control over that. I don't have enough projects in the pipeline that are shovels in the ground to be comfortable counting them or trying to do that math to get us to where I would feel comfortable saying we can probably punt. And I don't mean hope for the best, but that's kind of what we're talking about here, right? I don't think I can make that. We're not connecting those dots.
Let me ask a question based on what Greg just asked. So last year, the schools took out 1.2 in their revolving funds and everything else. Part of their $3 million increase this year is to replace some of that. How much of it?
I know they cut. I believe from my state of the town message, there was $850,000 cut out of operating expenses and pulled out of revolving funds.
So the $3 million that he's asking for, the school district is looking for this year. Is 850 part of that $3 million to replenish those accounts?
There's no, as far as I know, there is no replenishment. It's
It's
just
just making up
putting
for what
that
was lost.
putting that
Okay.
back into
Yep.
the operating.
Understood.
budget.
Thank you.
All right.
Sorry, I didn't mean to
Nope,
interrupt you.
not at all. These are all valid, great conversations. Go ahead, Will, to the next one. So this is scenario 2, straight up override, right? We've been talking about this for 5 years. The pro of that is that, you know, we fill that funding gap and it raises the levy, and that's now your new levy limit. Con, obviously, it's an override. Nobody likes overrides.
What size override? A $1.6 million override?
Well,
Well, that's just one.
that's
Well, the reason I asked for that.
Yeah.
The reason I'm asking for 1.6, I know our history has always been to ask for 5 years because you don't want to burn
Right.
the voters out.
Right.
But if you look at a combination of what you were talking about in scenario 1, a 1-year gap to
Right.
see if the growth comes.
Right.
Maybe a 1-year override to see if the growth comes
Mhm.
instead of using your reserves. And then maybe you don't need an override next year. And if you do, now you plan for a bigger override.
Right.
So maybe a 1-year override might be something we want to think about.
Wait,
Yeah.
so we're thinking that new growth could potentially cover the gap, like that forecasted gap? If we're
I-
growing that much, isn't that gonna bring more people into the town and cost more?
It depends on where you're growing, right? And so, generally speaking, if you look at the housing numbers, your higher density developments, which is one of the places where we're seeing the most growth or most opportunity for growth, don't drive school age children. They just don't, statistically across the state. Secondly, we do have some, you know, we have UPS that's breaking ground anytime now. The problem with UPS, and I say that a little tongue in cheek, is that there's a TIF in place. So year 1's 100%, year 2, 50.
But they pull a building permit.
Right.
Do the assessors still assign the growth? You just can't tax them.
Correct.
That growth gets added to the budget. Doesn't matter if they're paying the taxes or not, you still get that growth. Now, it gets spread amongst
Right.
all your other taxpayers, but you still get that growth
Get
in
that
the
growth,
budget.
right.
If they pull a building
Pull a-
permit and they start building.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
Yeah,
that's
so
there. That's
the
just
building, the levy capacity goes up by the full amount,
That's
right?
that's what I'm asking, Dan.
yep. Correct.
So
But
having them start is
Which-
is a
which-
big deal.
which we have. They've pulled a building permit. We've been paid. So
That's,
So is that in the 900, or is that not
Nope.
in the 900?
it's not in the 900.
not even counted? That's why there's some potential down the road.
Right, there's some potential there, but I also, again, maybe I'm overthinking this. Feels like some pretty uncertain times, right?
Yeah.
We just got all these random things yesterday, the
Oh, my
freezes and stuff.
I know.
So my concern is that we have some dip in the housing market. We see another 2008-ish scenario, and now all that thing that seemed like a small risk is now a very big risk, and now we're in much worse shape than when we started. It's just not traditionally how I've ever budgeted. I've always lived exactly in
conservative,
what we have,
Yep.
and I've never. It's just not how I've gotten here. Okay, let's move on because we're gonna. So this is the 2.5 scenario. This includes we would look at that municipal solid waste going out and becoming an enterprise fund. We would then close that gap that we have left with your reductions. So let's say instead of a $1.5 million decrease for the schools, it's a $1 million decrease, right? In request. It's not great, but it's better. We're heading in a direction. And you know, perhaps we've got some other strategies that combine with 2.5. These are just kind of general thoughts. And then number 3 is go on to the next slide there. We do nothing. We can leave it like it is. The upside to that is that, you know, Grafton is on track with its Prop 2.5 and new growth trends. The problem with that is that you have major service disruptions and loss of staff, right? So I know grand oversimplifications, but it's one slide.
And
Dan?
so,
Sorry.
Yeah, I want to disagree with the idea that it would adjust Grafton to Prop 2.5 and new growth trends, because the the cost of education is just rising faster than the arbitrary 2.5% plus new growth. And if we do those major cuts in one year, the remaining budget is still going to grow at that same pace. And we're just going to have to do more major cuts the next year. That's why when we talk about doing, a 5-year override, it's a much bigger number than the first year increase. Each of those numbers at the bottom of that slide that Jay has, for each year that of the shortfall, each of those numbers is what we're going to end up cutting each year. So this doesn't, reset Grafton to, living within our means. This just is, the first year of major cuts, of many years of major cuts, until our school system is just known across the state as being one of the worst. I really, really don't want this to be interpreted by anyone as, the living within our means solution. This is the let Grafton crumble solution.
May I ask a question? When you presented this to the select board the other night, did they give you direction?
Not explicitly, no. So,
What, isn't it their job to give you direction?
yes,
What kind of leadership is that?
I'm not gonna.
Well, no, I'm not, don't,
Retort.
please, I want you to keep your
Okay,
job.
thank you.
But what kind of, I'm saying that for any select board member that's listening right now, you're trying to put together a budget. They're not giving you any guidance. They're not telling you what to do. So you're sitting here and you're coming up with scenarios and ideas that, based on what? They have to give you guidance. That's their job.
Yep, I agree. And so the guidance I got from the board is, and I'm extrapolating because there was no vote, there was no hard and fast thing, but it's essentially move whatever you can, cut whatever you can, get as tight as you can, and then let's see if where we end up, but also that there seems to be a preference for avoiding an override, which I don't disagree with, right? But so that's I think I'm trying not to oversimplify it, but I think that's kind of where I ended up. I have a select board member in the audience. I was just trying to. I don't want. I also.
Yeah, that's how I interpreted
That's-
it as well.
okay,
Yeah, they seem to be somewhere between 1 and 2.
Yes.
They wanted to avoid 3.
They want to
by
go
and
through
large.
the budget line by line and
Yeah.
see where the.
Yet nobody really wants to see 3 in its entirety, right?
Certainly not.
I will just. Yeah.
I'm sorry, I shouldn't have.
No, that's okay.
I
So-
apologize to put you on the spotlight.
Yeah, I want to be clear. Scenario 3, adjust Grafton to the new. It 100% does that because there's no other option. So, it doesn't say reset. It says adjust. And I just want to be clear that that's the intent of what that means. All right.
Can I ask you a question? You might not be able to answer.
It depends. I'm kind of getting.
So
to the end.
what?
He doesn't like your
What
question,
would
I
the? So for me, I feel like if we're gonna go for an override, it needs to be kind of the only way we can get through this situation. And if we can, if we do have this hope of new growth, and we have good reason to have hope, obviously it's nobody has a crystal ball. I feel like if we went for an override and it failed, and then we were able to meet the budget numbers, that would make people lose confidence in
Absolutely.
this whole process.
Right.
And it's so much money that we're talking about, and people feel so overwhelmed by it that I think for me, if we could bridge that gap however we can to show them that we're being good stewards of their money, but also explaining that if this breaks the other way, next year we are going to be in an override situation and we have cut what we can cut and we want to give level services. Like that seems like the most transparent
Yes, I agree.
way.
And to piggyback on that, that's why we're talking about these scenarios. So again, we got a lot of grief after the select board meeting about talking about one-time use of funds, talking about all these different things. but that's our job. Our job is to put out all of the options, and we're gonna see what the best fit for the Grafton taxpayers. You don't have to agree with them, and you may not like them, but we are going to discuss them in an open, public, and transparent way to try to figure out what that blend is. And the blend is probably scenario 4 that doesn't exist. That's a hybrid of kind of everything, right? Because we're going to pull every lever that we can. But I think you're absolutely right, Angelina. We need to be able to go to the taxpayer and say, here's all of the things we did to avoid having to ask you for more money.
Right.
And we've done all of those things, and now we're there.
So, logistical question: when does the select board sign the election warrant? That is the point at which we have to decide whether or not
Yep.
there is a question on the ballot.
Yep. We're just pulling up the election calendar because I don't know the date on the top of my head.
So what you're saying, Greg, is you work back from that date to figure out when decisions.
That is the absolute last date at which
Put it on the
it
ballot,
can be
unless they
decided,
call a special election.
right.
That's not
Will's going to work on that for you, Greg. But you're right. That's the absolute drop dead.
I have a maybe what if theoretical question. So I know when we talked last year, we talked about maybe when we talk about an override. 5 is a long way out to project, and the only reason we really made it this year was because of the ARPA funds. We got to use those and allocate those. So maybe 3-year override, as we talked about last year. If we did do a 3-year override, and in that first or second year, the new growth caught up to where there is no longer a gap,
Right.
what happens with the extra funds?
continues on.
It just continues on. So the capacity decrease or the capacity issue, the rub, would just be prolonged, right? We wouldn't need it in time. I mean, hopefully we'd figure out a way to get out of this consistent deficit that
Right.
we're working on. But
So it almost has to as like a bank, if you will, for future fiscal years that we couldn't, even if it's beyond the 3 years, we could tap into.
right.
Okay.
Yeah, the override, the only thing the override says is increase the levy capacity. We expect it to last this.
Yeah.
There's nothing binding.
Right.
About
So
that.
if new growth did increase and then we could use those funds in year 4, then great. Or, you know,
Yeah, Amber
And then
had
you
her
won't be on
hand up. She might have the
Amber
answer.
might have the answer to that.
We do have one hand on Zoom in the attendees. I don't know if we're taking.
And
I
Not
did,
anymore.
I did see that hand, but that individual has left. I was going to take at the end, unfortunately.
Oh,
Put it this way,
all right.
The
Thank you.
question has to go to the town clerk to be on the ballot 35 days before the election.
okay,
So that would be the,
May 21st is the election. So
we were working backwards. So May 1st. No.
no.
April 15th, somewhere in
Yep.
that range.
Yep.
early mid-April.
Dan?
Yeah, regarding the 1 year versus 3 year versus 5 year, I just want to point out that the override doesn't cost anyone money. It just increases the amount that the town can tax, and then we raise that money through town meeting, and then it costs people money. But if we were to do a 1 year override for the first year versus a 5 year override, and still raise the same amount in the first year, it would cost people the same amount in the first year. So we're not talking about saving anybody any money. We're only talking about forcing supporters of doing a 5 year override to put in all the work of doing another override sooner. Or, I guess from the other perspective, giving people who oppose it another chance to stop it sooner. But it's not actually saving anybody any money. The other part of it is if we do a larger override and like we were just talking about, that extra if we don't need it, that extra capacity is just there to be used when we do eventually need it, but it still doesn't cost anybody any money to have that capacity there. It's not raising that money. It's only authorizing that capacity. So I don't really see, I guess the only value I see to doing a smaller override, a shorter number of years override, is if we think it's politically more likely to be accepted and passed by the voters.
Dan, I'm going to disagree. It's not just politically. If you don't need the extra capacity, what it does is it allows you to get a better handle on what the growth is going to be over the next year or so before you ask for so all of a sudden you come in, back to Nick's question. If all of a sudden all this growth comes in and just spreads out the capacity over several years, why go through an override, get everybody up in arms because they're going to be looking at $5 million or $10 million, whatever that number is, when you don't have to do that. If you do a 1-year override, and it's there to bridge the gap until you see what's happening, then I think it's better management doing it that way. Don't go for what you need based on speculation. Go for what you need based on need now, and then you can do more analysis, and then maybe some of this UPS and some of these other high rises will come into fruition. That was my point.
Yeah, I guess I feel like anyone who is going to be opposed to the override is going to be outraged, whether it's 1 million or 5 million.
Yeah, you're right. You're right.
I don't think
Yeah, I disagree.
I don't really think it's going to change any voters' minds. I think people are going to want to pay a little more to fund public schools, or they're going to want to not pay more and let the public schools drastically deteriorate in quality. I think that those are really the positions, and whether you want to fund the schools for 1 year or 5 years, I don't think it's going to make a difference for voters. I understand your point that, a year from now, we might be looking at a really great situation with new growth, and we might not need the other 4 years. I get that. But I think it's still too early to really bet on that, and having to do another override vote next year. So to do an override vote this year and then another one next year, I feel like people are going to be frustrated with that more than they would be if we did one this year for 5 years and then didn't need it all. I feel like people will be less frustrated with that situation. I feel like most people wouldn't even notice it. They wouldn't really even understand that anything happened because they don't pay attention to that level of detail. So
I mean, I think the other way though is if you go out 5 years, and we barely made it with the 5 year we had this time, so it's hard to project out that far. So if we do a shorter amount, we can more accurately project. I mean, we could get to, if we do a 5 year, we estimate the amount. I think no one expected the inflation we had this year. So I mean, we could get to the year 4 and our budget's too far apart where we either have to go another override or making severe cuts anyway. So I think that's the other point about doing a smaller.
Yeah, when we sat here, I remember sitting over there March of 2020 is when we made the decision to go for the big override. And it was based on the projections at that time. Inflation wasn't that crazy, so 3.2 million made sense. And then all of a sudden COVID hit, and it shrunk the time. That override probably could have lasted 6 or 7 years if we didn't get hit with the high inflation we got hit. So I think you make a very, very good point there. More information, better decisions.
Yep.
I like that. Don't you like how we hijacked your budget presentation?
So I wasn't even.
Yeah, so based on Mark's 35 days, we're looking at probably like the first week in April, the select board would have to sign the warrant. So
Yep.
just over 2 months.
Plenty of time. We do, just for information, if you go on to the town administrator's page on the website and go to budget, we do have all the budget documents, including the forecast and everything else. So if you want to go way far down, you can do that as you're.
It's a lot of good information.
Yeah. We did okay there. All right, can we move on to capital plan? Is everybody done with the other part for now? Okay, great. So this year's capital break, wow, got southern for a second. Our capital breakdown is $4.49188 million, and I'm going to show you why. Go to the next slide, Bill. That's because this includes an authorization to borrow that's wrapped up in that $4.5 million, as well as some requests to CPC. The town is looking to redo the playground at Ferry Street, and that's about $378,000. And so we have $100,000 in the capital plan, and the other 278 we're going to request out of CPC. So that's why that number looks much larger than what we normally would have. And if you remove the borrowing and the CPC, it's 2.8 million, which is slightly higher than we have been in previous years, but not incredible.
It's still within your, it's still within your.
Still within
available
our
funds.
means. Yep.
And that borrowing is like 4 years down the road.
Correct.
Has
Yes,
to be approved
great
here.
point. We're trying to get authorization to borrow approved today for a truck that won't be delivered for 48 months.
And if you don't get the authorization today,
Right.
you can't order it, and
can't
now you're
order
gonna be 17 years before you get it.
Exactly. So we
That's how, the lead time is crazy.
yeah, it's unbelievable. So that's why that's
Fuzzy
there.
math there.
And that was the same kind of thing we did last year. That was 36 months.
Correct.
So now they're out
Which
at
is
48.
which is actually it grew.
I say that's optimistic.
It's up.
Yeah.
It's up now. All right. So let's go briefly over what we've got on this capital plan. So you will see that there are, I think, 5 projects for the schools. And I did note on another slide that funds the schools at about whatever this adds up to. I just drew a total blank, but they got $600,000. The schools received $600,000 as a mid-year capital purchase for the roof, and for I think a fire panel. Is that what they did?
Yep.
Yeah, the panel.
Fire alarm.
Yes.
Yeah.
Fire panel. And so what we try to, what I've been trying to do year over year is fund the schools between 800,000 and $1 million. Jay and I did have the conversation as we were doing those mid-year fundings that would impact what we had available for capital, because I didn't want to crush other departments that weren't getting mid-year capital increases.
Yeah, 540. Quickly.
Thank you so much. 540. So, so we have 160,000 for stadium lights, $200,000 for general roof repairs. You'll remember we did that big roof project at North Grafton Elementary, or North Street Elementary. You will also be, I think, excited to know is that Will's been working on roof inspections. So we do have a company that's inspecting every roof in the municipality, both municipal and school side, as well as we funded, is it 3 or 4 thermal inspections? 4 thermal inspections
Most
via
of which
drones.
through a grant.
Yep, 10,000 of which was funded through a grant. I think we paid like $300.
Yep.
Out of Grafton funds, so that's great. Metal roof replacement and water heater replacement. Water heaters in schools pretty big, and then the new fire panel for a different school. I believe that is the middle school. All right. New garage for the cemetery department. So this is like a 30 by 30 Butler building. It's not an extravagant building. It's really just to get our equipment out of the weather. We have the Honeyware software upgrade that I was discussing, I think, before the cameras turned on here. It's an $80,000 software upgrade. We'd be going from 2008 software up to current date. And I don't know that we're going to get by with pushing that another year. The UPS, uninterruptible power supply, needs to be replaced at the police department. That's a $25,000 cost. Fire chief is looking for a $20,000 capital expenditure for an electronic sign for out in front of the fire department to be able to push out his fire weather and other things that the fire department is doing. That may or may not survive. The chief and I have been talking about that, and so that may be something that changes over time. Stations 1 and 2, again, as apparatus gets bigger and storage space gets more limited, they are looking to have some sheds to put some of the equipment that doesn't get used as much. So I would anticipate like your UTVs and your boats and things that don't need to be indoors, warm, ready to go like a truck does. And then Station 3 upgrades. This is the second phase of our Station 3 upgrade. You'll recall we did 2 phases at Station 2, and now we're doing 2 phases at Station 3, and this is the second phase at that one for a total of $915,000 spent on buildings and facilities.
Where would the new garage be located?
You know what, Greg? I don't know.
Okay.
I will get you that. It's actually it's in the link when you click it.
Okay.
I I'm gonna mess it up, so I'm not even gonna do it, Greg. Okay. I just want to point out, so these two plan updates for planning board, those may change. I'm working with the planner, but she is out sick, and so I thought it was best to include them, and we'll circle back on those. We also have the open space and rec and ADA self-evaluation transition plan update in here. And we have some archive room storage. So you've, I'm sure, never been in the archive room here. It is the old locker room shower area, and it is packed full with stuff. So we've been cleaning out since I got here, but we do need better organization to be able to actually utilize some of this space. So that's what we're looking to do. It's just planning that happens to be asking for it. $378,000 for the Ferry Street playground replacement, as well as adding some pour-in-place surface, which is for accessibility purposes. So again, that's a $378,000 project. $100,000 is coming out of the capital plan. All right, trucks and wheeled vehicles. So cemetery needs a new 1-ton dump. We need to replace our 6-wheel catch basin cleaner. Replace engine 1, that just continues to be a lease payment that we have. Replace another dump truck at the highway department. The cruisers, as we discussed, and engine 2, which is the borrowing. All right. Now, if you do go on to our capital plan, all of these have photos and clickable links and data and spec sheets and all of that.
It'd be useful to put lease payment on that replace engine 1 line.
Yeah, this is just my stab at it. It goes into detail in the plan, but
Yep.
you're absolutely right. It's a good note.
Heather?
I just had a quick question. Because it takes so far for these engines to be made, do you have an estimate of how much they'd actually increase that price? 'Cause don't they kind of like hold us
Right.
to
So
it? Like,
no, they'll probably have an adjustment. So our last truck, we paid almost an extra $90,000 towards it. This engine quote here does have an escalation in there.
okay.
So obviously, if we don't need the money, we won't spend the money. But we did give some wiggle room based on what the manufacturer told us to. We might think to expect. But again,
Right.
as
So you,
as
so you
Kyle
put a
said,
contingency in there.
Yes, there's a contingency. I don't know if it would survive the inflation that we just had, but
Right.
but hopefully it doesn't need to. So
What was the
Okay.
actual?
Okay.
it's in the capital plan. It's less than 1.4 million.
Okay.
Perfect.
I'm this is Evan's growth, because I usually tell you top of mind and then I'm off because I've got so many numbers in my head. So now I just don't do that.
We're all impressed.
Okay. Yes, I know. Me just saying, go look it up yourself. Doing a fantastic job. Okay. Other equipment. So we have a Flock. This is an LPR camera system. I don't know if people are familiar with this. It's called a license plate reader system. People hate it, but it is a very valuable policing tool. It serves a number of purposes, but this
We
is...
put in the cameras so we know where to avoid.
You'll find out. No, so these don't do speed. They don't do red lights. They're not doing any of those things. These are simply going to be, it'll be a 10 camera system at the main egresses to the
If there's
town
an
of Grafton.
accident, if there's something like that,
Accident, but bolos,
Yep.
missing children, silver alerts, all of those things. I used the example, obviously everyone knows that I live in Munson. Munson has 4 of them. And I'm still good friends with the chief there. And they've had 2 major arrests that were people out of, 2 of them were people out of New York City that were going town to town in Western Massachusetts and doing break-in sprees overnight until 10, 20 cars overnight. And they were arrested simply on the fact that the LPR camera pinged the cruiser and said this is where they just went by. Wow. The cruiser followed them into Walgreens, which is the local hangout spot, and you know, got 2 people off the street.
nice.
I'm a huge proponent of LPR cameras. I think that they're an amazing tool.
Was
And-
this requested by the chief? or is this?
So this, yes, everything's by the chief. Chief's 100% on board. This started, so the police make the mistake of bringing me to their annual trade show, which they do because then they can get me excited about things that they want, which is great strategy. But in this particular case, I was really drawn to this idea. And again, I know chiefs all over the state.
We're adding 5.
Yeah, this is not a.
It's good. It's great. Support that 100%.
Yeah, so like I was talking to the chief last week in Munson. Munson's tied to 50 other local communities that are sharing data. So as soon as they enter a bolo, Munson has it in their cruiser, and we can get some of these people off the street. Especially listen to the scanner all day, them try to find people and not know if they've crossed the border. We're right up against Worcester. People run from Worcester into Grafton with regularity. I think it's a great tool. I will also point out that $70,000 is actually 2 years of the process. So it includes the installation of the cameras and 2 years worth of the leasing of
Are
the
you
cameras.
doing the trial period now?
Nope, not yet. We haven't touched any of it yet.
We just started out.
Yeah.
It's fun.
I'm sure. I'm excited about it. I think it's a great thing.
Do you know what the yearly cost will be going forward?
Roughly $30,000. That's the software, the maintenance of the units. We don't own the units, which is great too, because if they stop working, they get smashed. I mean, it's just probably going to happen. So,
So will that get added to the operating budget going forward?
yep, sure will.
It's recurring.
Yeah.
This is our taser leases. I know. I know. It's awesome though. So tasers, that is our 5-year program for the tasers that we bought, and
This year, 1, 2, 3.
this is year 2,
year 2.
which is working out great. Suppressed patrol rifles. This is one of the chief's requests. If I don't know how much people know about firearms, but there are patrol rifles in every vehicle when they're out on shift. If you've ever fired a patrol rifle, so they are an AR platform essentially. They are loud as all get out, about 140 decibels, and they can cause pretty severe hearing loss, even from one incident. So if we ever got into a situation where we needed to use patrol rifles, this is a way that we can protect our staff moving forward. Not uncommon, and in my opinion, necessary, especially if, God forbid, they're ever doing any work inside of a building. It's real loud.
Is this a replacement or an add-on?
Replacement. So we would the $30,438 includes our trade-in of the patrol rifles that we have currently. Lastly, on this page anyways, Knox security key apparatus mounts. That's a fancy way of saying we're going to put keys to all the buildings that the fire department needs to get into every single fire apparatus, in a much more organized and necessary way.
So this is like the lockbox thing that we added to our bylaws a year and a half ago.
Correct. Yeah, and this is just putting obviously the units in all of the trucks. Actually, never seen it because the chief's never brought me to a trade show. Just saying. Okay, you're gonna see this is new. We put OPEB funding into the capital plan. Why did we do that? So we've had a full actuary study, which we will make available to all of you. I don't think we did that yet, but looking at our OPEB liability. And so what it comes down to is that if we continue to fund at the rate that we've been funding, right, we're up to 750,000, very exciting. It's almost useless. You might as well just wait till Worcester County is fully funded in 2035 and then shift that money over to your OPEB trust. However, if we fund it at this escalating value that you see in front of you here, which starts at 300,000, if we do this year over year, by the time we get to the point where we are shifting, so your 2035 numbers, we'll save $20 million by doing this.
Is that deals with your net present value? Is that what that
Correct.
300,000 is? Excellent idea.
Yeah.
So I know you mentioned several times Worcester retirement being fully funded. Does that mean that we have fully funded what we need to do, or is that something that's Worcester itself is?
No, we've fully funded what we need to put into with some caveat, and I'm going to tell you, it's a big document, and there's a lot of caveats in it. But essentially, what happens is, rather than paying in our $5 million a year, you're going to pay, $1 million to fund whatever our new stuff is going on, and then you can take the rest of that and throw that into your OPEB trust. But if we've funded with our minimum liability here, when we get there, our liability is $20 million less than it is now. So instead of $65 million liability, it's $45 million liability.
And by the way, when you go for your bond rating increase, Wall Street's gonna love that.
Yep. So,
Great idea.
we're excited about it.
What's the year again?
2035, I believe, is when Worcester
So
County.
it's only 10 years.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
$3 million investment is going to
It's-
save
it's-
us 20.
It winds up, because this escalates over time.
Right.
And I'll show you that, but
30% a year, I think.
yeah, so you wind up paying about $4 million into this as we get towards fully funding. But again, because of compound interest, it saves you $20 million on the other side,
Smart.
which is phenomenal. And then the MS4 engineering, which I'll just change that spacing, is about 125,000 that we shifted from operations into capital.
Dan?
So are these numbers part of the numbers we saw earlier, or is this in addition?
This is all capital funding. So this is
Okay.
from your capital stabilization account and your free cash account.
So these are additional operating funds requests, but they're
Oh, yes. Yes, I see what you're saying. Yes, correct. So that's the category that it falls in our capital plan. So it's not a truck, it's
Okay.
not a building, it's not a park improvement. It has to live somewhere, and that's the terminology that we use in there.
okay. So, but we're paying for it with one-time funds, but we're also kind of expecting it to be an ongoing thing.
Right. So the MS4, we've got some other work to do on that. We have been funding that via ARPA funds. That's this
Yeah.
increase as we. So again, it was a kind of a shock to the system as we're trying to stay as lean as possible. We are able to fund OPEB though on a recurring basis out of free cash stabilization. Any of those things that will not affect us adversely. So that's a viable strategy there.
Got it. Okay.
And that is all I have that's all I have to say about that.
It's a great presentation, Heather.
Thank you. Thank you. You all had wonderful, very thoughtful questions. I appreciate the back and forth.
So there wasn't a lot of detail on the increases. So it's the major changes are eliminating 2 part-time positions, and pretty much everything else is level funded, plus the increases we have no control over.
Correct. Yep. So and so that's on the website, and what I had sent you guys is the variance report essentially, but or the fiscal year to fiscal year. You also now should all have access to ClearGov, and you will also have. We will make that into a Excel report for those that don't want to go onto ClearGov and want to navigate it that way. And you'll see it. It is one of the most boring budgets I've ever put together. It's essentially salaries move and expenses don't.
And the public should know that from now, finance committee members go meet with the individual departments, and then we're gonna have a big budget meeting where the departments come in and present their budget, so we'll get into the weeds and the nitty gritty.
Yep.
Over the next month or so, so.
Yeah, great point. This is more.
This
of a
is just
35,000
introducing
foot
it to us.
overview.
Yep.
Thanks, Evan. And it's actually a phenomenal segue to the second item on the agenda.
Oh,
Do you have
fortuitous.
any public comment before we close the hearing?
Thank you. Any public comment before we close the hearing?
Move to close the public hearing.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion to close the public hearing. Do we have any discussion? Okay, seeing none, we will take a roll call. I'll start online. Heather?
Aye.
Skip?
Aye.
Dan?
Aye.
Nick?
Aye.
Mark?
Yes.
Angelina?
Aye.
Kyle?
Aye.
Greg?
Aye.
And Victoria votes aye. Okay, that passes. All right, the public hearing is closed. Thank you. Thank you, Greg. Okay, so now on to the second item in the agenda as foretold. And that is for us to look over our past assignments to review each departmental budget in a line by line manner. As Mark alluded to, that is when each of us will go and visit with the department heads and speak through everything that they have shown out in ClearGov, at least for everybody but the school committee. I believe in our meeting packets, we have last year's.
I'd like to keep what I have if that's okay with the committee.
Yeah. The one comment I have on that is we have finance director / accounting, treasurer, collector, and town administrator all listed separately.
And that's all.
And we pretty much, we do those all together. So we can probably consolidate that to Mark, Angelina, and myself for.
That's what we
for
did.
the-
We did when we sat down with,
yeah.
yeah, that's what we did last year. I agree.
Just makes it a little confusing that Mark and I are on one and Mark and Angelina are on the other two, but we do them all together. So.
So then you want to stay on police?
Yeah.
And schools? Mm-hmm. Okay. Victoria, you gonna stay with schools on us?
I would love to.
Excellent.
No, I'm happy to stay with my assignments as well. Does anybody have any desire to switch to move to anything else, or are we all satisfied with where we've been?
Satisfied.
Yeah, I'm good.
You're fine.
Okay, great. I think that makes it easy, and I think it's a good call as well.
Madam Chair,
Yes, of course.
the building for cemeteries at Fairview.
I'm so sorry.
It would be, the building for cemetery would be at Fairview.
Thank you.
I'm jumping back to that, sorry.
Oh,
Yeah, I apologize.
Capital.
well, my brain.
Capital
did
plan.
not-
I know, I could see it, and then my brain started going, what are you doing? Very inappropriate time to be just spouting this off. But that's, I learned that from Mark, so,
Perfect. Okay. Then, as per last year, we'll start reaching out to our individuals. I'm happy to reach out to the folks for any of the committee assignments that I'm on.
I'll reach out to Jay. I'll set up the meeting for the three of us with Jay.
Okay.
And I'll reach out to the police chief. And I'll reach out to Evan.
I do have a question for me. Because I'm doing, hold on, what is it? Where is it? Where am I? I know I'm talking, well, it's not Bob Berger anymore for the cable oversight.
you'll be talking directly with Bob DeToma.
Okay.
But you can, you know what, Heather, why don't you set that up with me?
Okay.
Because Bob and I are.
And how about,
Bob
because
and
I dealt, so all three of mine, I dealt with Bob. He did the fire, the South Grafton Community House, and cable oversight. He did all of them with me.
So guess what? I'm in charge of all of that now.
Okay, then I will contact you.
Yeah, reach out. We'll have a chat.
Okay,
Okay.
sounds good.
You're now the chief cook and bottle wash. Is that what they call it? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm now the director of maintenance.
Yeah, it sounds like his chat's already done.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Skip, did you want me to take some of yours? Like the inspector that get like all the inspector stuff? Or is that,
Well, the inspectors, I mean,
who are you talking to?
no,
Is that
because
also?
I'm just going to wind up talking to the building department anyways.
Okay, so you're okay doing
Yeah,
that?
that's fine. That
Okay,
takes like 2.5 seconds.
Okay.
So, on this vein, so then we have to figure out when we're gonna do our Saturday morning meeting, so that,
That's
we'd
it.
have to have our meetings before that Saturday morning, so
That's right.
when does the budget have to be?
That's
Fine.
item 5 on the agenda.
Oh,
is
I should have
upcoming
probably
meetings.
read the entire agenda.
Yes.
before I did
It is a lot of words.
this. I'm not that bright, Victoria.
I know, I'm so sorry. Traditionally, we've always done it, our Saturday meeting, very close to March 10th, which sticks in my brain because that is my birthday. So if I had to guess, we'll do it either the 8th or the 15th, but we'll get there.
Okay,
We should have a birthday cake
we will.
at our meeting.
That's brilliant. Everyone gets.
Would you like to have the cake before or after your birthday? Because that's how we pick the date.
Oh.
So if it's before your birthday, we'll meet on the 8th. If it's after your birthday, we'll meet on the 15th.
Okay, that's a very.
Try and think about
Have one for both.
I would like 3 cakes, please. Okay. All right, perfect. That is easy, and that is what I had hoped. Okay. So the next item on the agenda is to review the annual report, which is now in draft form. Did everyone have a chance to read through this?
I did. I moved to approve the annual
So-
report as presented, unless you have a problem with it.
No, just we can just do it in discussion. So I second the report motion. I did find one error, and I already sent it to Amber. The very bottom of the first page says $4.4, and there should be $1 million in there.
That's a big.
Can you do that for me too with my bank account? Just insert $1 million in there for me.
Throw it
Thanks.
Just ask Amber; she'll take care of it.
That'd be great.
Okay, any other discussion around the report? Okay, so shall we move to vote for it then?
Yep.
To approve it, I will start online. Heather,
Aye.
Skip,
Aye.
Dan,
Aye.
Nick,
Aye.
Mark,
Aye.
Angelina, Kyle,
Aye.
Greg,
Aye.
and Victoria. Aye. So with that one correction, we have approved the annual report of the finance committee. Phenomenal. Okay. The next piece we have on the agenda is meeting minutes for October 17th and October 21st.
I move that we approve the meeting minutes of October 17th and October 21st as presented.
Second.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Okay. Seeing none, we'll vote to approve the minutes. Heather,
Aye.
Skip,
Aye.
Dan,
Aye.
Nick,
Aye.
Mark,
Aye.
Angelina, Kyle,
Aye.
Greg,
Aye.
Victoria votes aye. That passes unanimously. Okay, so now let us schedule the upcoming finance committee meetings. I don't recall last year, did we have a meeting in between this meeting,
It depends on when we want to meet. If I remember correctly, and Greg, correct me if I'm wrong, your memory's better than mine. We meet with the schools on a Wednesday night. We don't meet with the school on a Saturday.
right?
I can't remember if we met with them before or after our
after.
Saturday meeting.
We met last year on the
It was-
16th and the 13th, and I think the 20th. I think we had BVT one Wednesday and school committee the other Wednesday.
And then we just did all the other departments on one Saturday.
Yep.
Okay. I think we should do the same thing this year.
That makes a ton of sense to me.
Because that worked out well last year.
I agree.
So that'd be 12th, 15th, and 19th.
So it looks like you're getting your birthday cake afterwards, Victoria.
I'm not picky. That sounds phenomenal. Does that work for everybody? The 12th and the 19th? And I can be obviously very flexible about whether we have Mike or Jay come in either of those days, whatever works best for them, right? And then bring everybody in on the 15th. Does that work for you, Amber?
Yeah, the 12th, 15th, and 19th are what I was going to suggest.
That's perfect.
Thank you, ma'am. It's perfect for me as well. Okay. And we will all have our super fun field trips prior to that. So we'll get those on the books.
I'll shoot you guys, Victoria and Angelina, I'll shoot you some dates for the schools, and Greg, I'll shoot you some dates with Angelina for Evan, and then I'll figure out the police.
And
I haven't met the new chief yet.
Oh, no? He's a great guy. He really is. Not just saying that because he has a gun and
You get to meet the new
And he
library
has
director.
cameras.
and he has cameras, block cameras.
And he takes you to
The trade show.
shows.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that was actually a Norm thing. I haven't gone with Neil yet.
Oh, I
But,
see.
It's gonna happen.
My chief just sends me photographs of the stuff he wants at the trade show.
I'm telling you, it's the best trade show I go
It's
to.
to go to,
Oh my
yeah.
God, it's so much fun.
I bet it is.
They have such cool stuff. You know.
Thanks. Okay. Then with that, I think we are all set.
Evan, thank you for a great presentation tonight. William, thank you for tonight.
You did great.
You too.
Thank
Well
you for
done.
putting up with Evan.
And all our questions and interruptions. And I'm sorry I went off, and I didn't mean to put you on the spot, but the message needs to be, they gotta provide you with direction. You can't just guess what you're supposed to do.
Well, they sort of did. They said, go back and scrutinize the budget line
That's
by
not,
line.
that's not direction. They should have told them, this is what I want you to do, this is what you should bring forward to us. This is the percentage increase, this is the amount, figure out what an override is, don't do an override. Give solid direction to the town administrator, so he knows what budget to present. That's my point.
Well, Leander, if there's anything that you need from us, please.
I will.
We're happy to meet and talk.
Yes.
Absolutely. Thank
We
you.
are adjourned.
All right. Excellent. Thank you.
Here.
I can't keep going on